By the way, as Jeff Moss says all the time, so much of what we're doing is about a fight for the undecideds, the not the authoritarians and not the very entrenched, humanitarian democracies in the world, but everybody kind of in the middle, like the Turkeys of the world and others like that. What are we doing to make them feel like our world is a better world to be a part of than the other guys? We kind of have it's a pain in the ass. It's harder than it is being an authoritarian, shitbag. At the end of the day, I mean, if FDR and Churchill were right, and I think they were, kind of asking nations to think about this in a bigger way and be a part of a united global community that seeks peace and so on is way more in our favor than, just being the toughest kid on the block. Sorry, that's way probably more than you wanted, but anyway.
No, it's interesting to get, your side of it, right? Because my point of view isn't always going to be like a 100% correct, representation of my opinion and what it is in the world at different levels, right? So like it's always valuable to hear everyone's opinion, in my opinion, right? So with Stuxnet, you were mentioning that it was a bit more advantageous for us to actually like kind of show that force, right? Which is interesting to me because I read the Kim Zader book, Zero Day on Stuxnet, right? So she kind of talks about the timeline of the evolution of Stuxnet to some degree, where, in the very beginning, it was extremely, built upon being stealthy, not being able to detect it, being present, even though they rebuilt those centrifuges and the entire facility. They ripped every wire out of the walls and everything, and it was still present, which still blows my mind to this day that is a thing, right? Makes me a little bit more paranoid too. But at some point in time, after actually doing it for a couple of years and not being detected, or not that she recognized it, but the semantic researcher recognized that there was a shift in the code where it was a little bit more noisy, that it was actually like trying to actively get out of the network and, relay different data. So, I guess my question then is that because in the book, and obviously you didn't write the book or anything like that, but in the book, they mention at some point in time, Israel probably got involved, and Israel's a little bit more offensive, right? They're a little bit more like out there, And so when they got involved, they were a little bit more aggressive and they started to want, the data to come back, right? And it kind of left out America being a part of that decision, almost that decision tree to some extent. So it's interesting to hear you say that it was also a part like in our national interest, which it makes sense. It makes sense that that was a part of the national interest for, that sort of thing to become more visible, I guess. Right. But it's always been painted in a way it's like, oh, well, America didn't make it to be more visible. Like we made it to be as stealthy as possible. Someone else, some other partnering country are the ones that messed it up, right? Because I guess in cybersecurity world, that would be a failure, right? Like you break the stealth part of your attack, like great job, you got found out, you're done. For us, it ends right there.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and I know there's been a lot of reporting that makes that point that it was they just got caught. But if you look at what else was going on in the world at that moment, particularly about the Iran nuke deal and so on, that we were the political aims of the program, because again, that program was not about hacking the nuclear program of Iran per se. It was about President Bush wanting to prevent a third war with a Islamic country.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, as things kind of kept going, and the Obama administration was trying to bring the Iranians to the table, that's when all this comes out. And so, I disagree with a lot of the reporting that's been on this that says that it was all an accident. I know that the relationship with Israel is fraught and so on, but there's real political ends to when that was found out and how and why and so on and so forth. Well, one of the ways, though, that I do think we can be actually achieve what you're talking about, maybe in less of a military way, in a less of a military way, is with law enforcement. And if I can, by the way, just shamelessly plug my book here for 30
Yeah,
seconds,
sure.
no,
Yeah.
10 seconds, and I'll go to this thing. So
But yeah, we
Bloomsbury just
didn't even
published
talk
a
about
book.
fentanyl yet.
Yes, no, that's okay. I'll mention a couple cyber aspects of it right now. So Bloomsbury just published a book that I wrote called Fentanyl, A Fight in the Mass Poisoning of America and the Main Cartel Behind it. Called Fentanyl, A Fight in the Mass Poisoning of America and the Main Cartel Behind it. And in that, you would think, I mean, as I said at the beginning of the program, I had no interest in working on fentanyl. I didn't know what fentanyl, I didn't know anything about fentanyl. I'm not a drug policy person. It's not an issue that it's ever, interested me or whatever. Fentanyl, though, is very different. Most people that take fentanyl, particularly initially, don't even know they're taking it. It's laced in something else they're taking. It's far more like a mass poisoning than it is like the next crack cocaine epidemic or something. Anyway, one of the things that we go into, or that I go into, is what law enforcement is doing right now with in cyberspace, going after groups like, for example, the Silk Road folks. I mean, I think that story is relatively well known. I use as kind of a starting point to talk about this. So, of course, that's the online drug marketplace. It's like Amazon started out for drugs, then became anything you wanted. Weapons, poison. All kinds of bad things, all the bad things. And it turns out that yes, the FBI was involved and so on, but also DHS was really involved. Homeland Security via HSI, which is actually part of ICE. They've been getting you know a lot of press these days because of everything going on. But what most people don't know is that they have a significant cyber capability, which I had no idea about, despite having worked at DHS for years, until we started this effort. And they've built capabilities over the years where they have regular kind of gumshoe law enforcement folks that train on how to hack into dark web marketplaces, how to impersonate bad guys on in these marketplaces or in other parts of the dark web and so on. So, for example, the guy at HSI who was doing the Silk Road program had gotten his way in, impersonated another criminal, and was an actual administrator of the entire Silk Road for months or maybe even years before they took down the guy who ran it. And that capability is somewhat nascent in law enforcement, but really could be stepped up dramatically to go after some of these criminal organizations that are out there. And what I found out when I was in the White House working on the national cyber strategy was that when you talk about transnational criminal organizations in cyber, everybody's just talking about ransomware. And what we don't do enough of is go after the big criminal organizations that are doing a host of other bad things in the country, like sell fentanyl, for example, and hack them, go after their finances, go after their money laundering, go after the individuals involved in the organization, impersonate bad guys and turn them against each other, which we do in law enforcement all the time in other capacities, and so on and so forth. And I do think that there where it's clear that you're dealing with bad guys. The cartel is not a good organization, and they don't do good things. There isn't a gray zone really. It's just bad, and we don't tout what we can do to them in cyberspace. And in fact, we don't fund a lot of the government that does have the authorities to go out and hack the Sinaloa cartel or the Russian mob or groups like that. And we should. And in that case, we should really flex our muscle. Every time we take down their crypto wallets, every time we identify who their brokers are and find ways to arrest those people and so on and so forth. That should be stuff that we're touting from the mountaintops to make all these criminal organizations think we're 10 feet tall. Well, no, particularly in relation to them, that we are 10 feet tall, and that we can do to them exactly what we did to the Iranians, is get into their shorts in a way that they will never get us out. Now, I think there's been scant attention paid to that, and I think we could achieve a lot of what you're talking about if we were to do that ourselves.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I've never thought about it from like the cartel angle, but that would actually, I mean, honestly, that would, prevent like boots on the ground, so to speak. Maybe not so to speak, but literally, Mexico and Venezuela and, wherever else the cartels are. Do you think that there's hesitancy of doing that due to potential like internal threats already present to the nation?